Alec Baldwin has been charged with involuntary manslaughter in the on-set shooting death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins last year. In a new op-ed in the New York Times, columnist Farhad Majou writes that Baldwin's total and immediate cooperation with police without the presence of a lawyer at the time of the incident might be why he's facing charges now. Majou writes, to people unfamiliar with the American criminal justice system, Baldwin's decision sounds reasonable. Something terrible happened and he wanted to help. But defense lawyers I talked to said Baldwin's case should serve as a reminder that if you are involved in a serious incident, it's best not to talk to the police unless you have an attorney present, which is good advice that more people should follow. So Baldwin allowed himself to be interviewed by the police for a long period of time. Even before, he didn't know that Halyna Hutchins was dead yet, I believe. Mm-hmm. So he's making statements to the police. And I think what a lot of people wrongly assume is that if you're innocent, well, what could you say to the police that would get you in trouble? And that is the most wrong impulse anyone could ever have, because when you're interviewed by the police, it goes on forever. You're emotional. They have so much power as interrogators to push you to say things. You can end up saying things that you don't think and are not true because it's how confession works. It feels good to confess. It feels good to give the police what they want to hear. Yeah. We use this tactic as journalists all the time when you interview someone. They want to give you the gaps you're missing. And people confess to things they didn't do all the time. And not because they're like tortured into doing it or they're like waterboarded or something. It's the psychological process that takes place. So he ended up saying that all sorts of things that could be used against him.
It's also worth noting that apparently he asked the police, "Am I being charged with anything?" They told him no, and I think that probably had a psychological effect on him and wanting to be make disclosures and be helpful.
And and they can say it in a way that is totally. Oh, no, we don't have under any belief that you're being charged with anything.
And it could be frankly true at the time.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. They're still getting statements from you that can be used against you later. So in the New York Times article, one of the kind of admissions that Baldwin apparently made was that the prop handler, Gutierrez Reed, apparently handed him the gun and assured him it was safe. She said, "Do you want to check?" This is a quote from Baldwin. She said, "Do you want to check?" And I didn't want to insult her. We never had a problem. I said, "I'm good."
He told the police that.
He told the police that. So there's this, implication that she asked him to double check, and this was his responsibility, not just as an actor, but as someone who was a producer and an authority figure on the set, in charge on the set. And he was asked to check. He declined to check. He framed it as, well, I didn't want to insult her integrity or her ability or anything like that. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there's a case for contributory negligence.
And if you tell the police that, you lose the ability to talk with an attorney, work through whether this would be good for your case or bad for your case, and then bring it up or not bring it up. Because you've told it to the police, they'll be able to offer it. And people think that if you say something to the police that is favorable to your case or that would tend to acquit you, well, then you can use that in trial, which is not true. You generally cannot have the police called to offer testimony in your defense. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. That's why they say what you say can be used against you, can't be used for you. It can only be used against you.
Yeah. The idea is that you might say things intentionally to the police to try to help your case. So those out-of-court statements can't be trusted. It's hearsay. Whereas statements against your own interest can be admissible because what are the odds that you want to say something that actually incriminates you? So that's a little evidentiary lesson. But so to that point, later in a later conversation with the police a week later, Baldwin said it was actually the film's first assistant director, a man named Dave Halls, not the prop person who handed them the gun. So now there's this argument that his testimony can't even be trusted because he can't clearly remember what happened. So even something that seems relatively neutral or positive is now potentially being used to say that he's not a credible witness in the first place.
Right, because now prosecution can say, well, he says this, but officer, whoever he is, says that in his conversation with Alec Baldwin made contradictory and conflicting statements about this, so his entire judgment of the incident is called into question. You don't.
Were you lying then, or were you lying then?
Right. Yeah. You create that situation when you talk to the police. If you have something, people will think, well, what if I know some? What if I'm innocent and the police need to know some piece of information that I have? Well, you tell that to an attorney, and you have the attorney relay that to the police under some agreement that you're not going to be prosecuted, or it's off the record, or that it can't be used in a case. There are ways to do it. You just have to talk through it with an attorney.
Yeah.
That's why you always ask you say thank you that you want to talk to me, police, and you can do so after I've talked with an attorney.
Yeah.
That's just what you do in all cases.
100%. And it's interesting that we're talking about this in the context of someone who is, wealthy and affluent, privileged, and all of these things. So that's not usually the case. But it goes to show that anyone can be caught up in these kinds of scenarios, and it really just is a hard lesson to learn.
And I want to say I believe everyone deserves due process, and everyone deserves the benefit of a consultation with an attorney. Alec Baldwin might very well be guilty of some very negligent conduct here. It's a horrible thing that happened. We heard, there's a lot of good reporting on all the bad things that were going on. This armor they were using seems woefully inadequate to the task before her. So I'm not saying this because I want Alec Baldwin to get off or something, but just these are principles of fairness that everyone that all people should have in mind if they have to deal with a criminal justice kind of situation. He might very well deserve some kind of quite serious punishment,
right? And
given the negligence he showed.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that there apparently was a whole history of labor violations on set as well. I mean, this is a very messy situation, and we'll continue to follow it and report on it as more details come out, and also more Rising for you right after this.